Listeners everywhere, welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, the weekly fix for your screen addiction and a trusted source for discussion of all things film and television. Please keep in mind that for the purposes of this podcast, Joel and Ryan are not acting as journalists, but rather fellow moving picture enthusiasts. All of their opinions should be taken as such. Also, please be warned that while Joel and Ryan may seem like petulant children, they are, in fact, adults who may occasionally use adult language. While they promise to bleep out all the worst words, it's a good bet you will still understand what they were saying. And now, with no further ado, here's Joel and Ryan.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, where if your number matches our system, you might be a winner. Welcome. So happy to have you. The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. I am Joel.
And I'm Ryan.
And of course, we have for the video, if you were watching us on video, you already know. But for you, dear listener, we have back the third member of our fantastical movie club extravaganza, Shauna. Hey, Jack. Woohoo! Yeah. How are you, Shauna? Are the dogs barking in Ohio?
I am good, but no, I put it on mute just in case. And then I said, and I am Shauna, and I realized I didn't say anything.
I saw you do that, and I'm like, oh, well, I'll have to introduce her anyway.
It's the danger, the great danger of our age, right? Trying to ride the mute button like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Really. Yep. Me personally, I've given up. I'd commit to on, and that's it. Whatever happens, happens.
Yep. I make too many, I say the Minnesota ope too much. So I sometimes have to ride the mute if I'm in meetings because I'll go, oh, and people go, oh, hey, Minnesota.
Is that what they say?
So welcome to the Movie Show. This week we will be talking about, we have our little movie club that we started doing this over the holidays with 3 holiday movies that we did. Was the holiday one the first one?
They were always sort of in the
Wall
movie
Street
club
one
to me, but yeah, I think it officially became that at the holidays.
Yeah,
that is correct.
And then of course we did the Wall Street, the business movie edition, of course, with The Secret of My Success and a couple other has-been movies. I don't even remember what we talked about. If it's not Secret of My Success, I just don't care. But this week we have some fun movies that we're going to talk about, and we'll get to those in just a minute. But of course, first we want to start off the show. We made a post about it on Facebook, but the passing of movie titan, director extraordinaire Richard Donner, the man who helped us believe that a man could fly. So yeah, he passed away this week. And it is it's a big loss, and a guy who I think it was it your post, Ryan, that said, you know, basically whether you know it or not, Richard Donner's films highly influenced pretty much everything that has come after.
Well, this group of us, we talked about one of his sort of lesser films, Scrooged, right? That was Dick Donner. That's actually as close to he came as sort of, I mean, it doesn't take place in an alternative universe or something. That's supposed to be our world, but it's this very heightened version of like television production and city life and all that. You know, he was criticized throughout the years as being this sort of just straight commercial director with no real sense of visual style. Like you never really knew if you were watching a Richard Donner movie or not. And I kind of see what people are saying. I mean, that's true to a certain degree, but you just look at the titles, all 4, Lethal Weapon movies, which started out as sort of Shane Black's sort of darkness was in that very first one. He wrote that script. They really didn't putz with it very much, but as they went on, they became more and more these sort of zany, madcap, almost satires of 80s action movies that were all about family and connection. And you notice they were like a rolling stone that kept gathering different actors that kept continuing through to the end. That was very much his sense of family. By the time the last Lethal Weapon movie, the final credits were going on Lethal Weapon 4, the credits show everyone who worked on the movie. Literally everybody visually is featured, until you get this last shot with the entire crew like sitting on risers, holding hands and waving to Why Can't We Be Friends, I believe is the song that's playing at the end of that. Anyway, the Lethal Weapon movies, no offense to Richard, but they get worse as they go. Partly because of that, they get looser, more fun. You get less involved in what's happening because it's all just sort of a send up. But I think that sums him up pretty well. Superman, The Goonies, Scrooged, Inside Moves, what else? Timeline, Maverick, Assassins, Conspiracy Theory. That's a pretty entertaining film. They're big Hollywood entertainments, but they're, even Timeline came around. Like, he did those with old, weird, prismatic lighting, optical effects. Like, he did all these big movies with no special effects in them. Even Superman was all like tennis balls on fire being shot in super slow motion and stuff like that. They're very, and Christopher Reeve really was up on these wires, and then they make the wires disappear, but he paid very close attention to his craft, but never really gave into the artifice of film, even as he got older, and certainly had the budgets and the power to do that. And he's just a cool guy that people really loved. People who worked with him again and again and again. The Salkinds who produced the Superman movies don't love him, but Warner Brothers loved him. Obviously produced like all of his films, but a couple of them there. And he was cool. And what can you say about the Goonies? And it's like, that he was a big part of that. You think if Spielberg would have shot the Goonies, like, it would have been pretty much the same, but you watch him interact with those people, or watch the kids in that cast like interact with him today. There's this, or last year, or whenever the last time they all got together, they get together from time to time. You can just tell that the relationship there is really special.
I saw something about one of the people involved with the Goonies, and I can't remember who it was, but they tweeted, "We lost the original Goonie."
There you go.
And I think that's so heartwarming and just reflects who he was to the people that he worked with. And
he was a super high energy, boss you around, yell at everybody, sort of old school director, without doubt. But if you're a good person, that just outs in the course of your experience with other people. And that's what these kids all got. There's the great story about how they were all forbidden from seeing the pirate ship set until it was the day of shooting. And every single one of them, but one of them, I think only Sean Astin did not go in, did as he was told, because he didn't want to get in trouble. All the rest of those kids all got a peek at the pirate ship beforehand. And there's a moment in the commentary on the DVD where they're all saying, "Oh yeah, I looked at it. Did you look at it?" Yeah, I did. And there's only the one kid saying, and you can feel him shaking his head and stuff in that scene. Like, it's, you guys, yell at one of you and you all cry, tell you not to do something and you all do it. It's really funny. It's not parental, it's something else, but I love that. The Goonies stories are the best. Now is a good time. The Goonies is this big summer movie, and now is a good time to revisit that and revisit those little extras and stuff, whatever's offered streaming or wherever on your shelf. It's great stuff. You really get a sense of him. Or listen to Margot Kidder talk about him from Superman. She loves him. She just loves that guy.
Yeah.
And that you can just feel that like through the screen. It's really, really cool.
Yep. Richard Donner, you will be missed. Okay. So we wanted to make sure we took
more about all those films at some point. I mean, there's
at some point, so many of those will appear on list shows that we do. Yes, Shauna. Yes.
I want to be a part of the Goonies one.
Yeah. You won't be alone there. Okay.
Goonies, I'm the first one to say it, so there.
Goonies deep dive. Shauna was first in line.
Well, next time maybe next time we do a big giant massive free for all, like maybe our next anniversary show. We'll talk Goonies and some.
There won't be a Richard Donner show because there'll be Superman shows and Goonies shows, and there might even be a Lethal Weapon show. Although
you know what?
really starts.
There won't be a. There probably won't be a Lethal Weapon show.
You don't know that. There might be.
But maybe a good idea is kids shows that rocked your world, like you remember. Goonies. I was in Michigan. I remember where I went to go see it. I remember who I was with. I remember how much I related to it. I think that would be kind of a fun show.
When I was a kid, when I was 13, I guess, when that came out, or about to turn 13, I remember just wanting to be a part of that, desperately wanting to make a movie like that. I didn't really look at it as like I wanted to be a Goonie. I sort of recognized the artifice of it, but just desperately wanted to be part of something that was that fun and that spread the fun like that did. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That longing, that's what I remember walking out of the theater on a rainy day, just like in Astoria, Oregon, where the story takes place. It was very,
that movie was one in the, in the early days of HBO and cable that movie would get played a lot. I'm remembering, I think, on HBO.
Not early days of HBO, or not the halcyon early days, but definitely got played a lot, no question.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, Richard Donner, we miss you. Thank you for all of the amazing films that
for real,
that you contributed to the cinematic world. Okay, so now on to the main course, which the movie club main course. I was calling that. So the idea behind this one was, who came up with this one? Was this you, Shauna, that you came up with movies that are kind of difficult, that are challenging?
I came up with that based on her wanting to talk about her movie.
Yeah.
I was like, what can we stick with that?
Okay. Yes. That so it kind of goes with
Shauna.
It kind of goes with the double feature theme that we were talking about double features last week on the show with Rob. Pairing. How do you pair up some films? So this was kind of a triple feature.
I don't even think they go very well together. The first two are from the same year, so they kind of are congruous together, but they're totally different kinds of stories. The point is, why let any sort of strict doctrine of connectivity get in the way of talking about three awesome movies? That's basically where I landed on this in the end.
Right. Well, and and the idea was that we kind of wanted to choose some films that can be challenging to watch. This was the first movie that
they all to one degree or another, all different ways, but they all challenge the viewer in a way that modern populist entertainment don't. So that's true of all of them for sure.
Great. All right. So one thing that we haven't had for previous movie club shows is a little stinger this week. Oh yeah, here it comes.
The first rule of movie club is you talk about movie club. The second rule of movie club is you talk about movie club.
Thank you, Brad Pitt.
Yeah, thanks.
We appreciate.
How did we get him to do that?
I had, it was one of those things where I had to call in a favor. It's like I probably should have saved it for like charity or something. But Brad's a good guy. Usually if you if you ask him nicely, he'll usually record something for you. So we thank you. We thank you, Brad. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule of being ungodly handsome to record that for us. All right. So the movies that we were going to talk about. So we're going to I'll give you the three titles that we're going to talk about today, dear listener. And the first one is the movie was chosen by Ryan from 2013. It is Prisoners. The second movie that we're going to talk about is also from 2013, and that is Nebraska. And the final movie is 96?
95
is 95 is Dead Man Walking. So three films that have Prisoners and Dead Man Walking especially have subject matter that is incredibly challenging. Nebraska is a movie that I find. I think it's a delightful movie. We'll get to it when we talk about it, but it also to me is a challenging movie to view. But let's talk about Prisoners first. This one was Ryan's choice for Shauna and I to watch.
Well, I'm interested. I have a lot to say about Prisoners, as you can imagine, but I'm interested in your impressions. I assigned you guys to watch it, and neither of you had seen it. Correct. And I know that it's sort of a mean movie to make your friends watch, especially your friends that are parents watch. Like I knew all that going in, but I figured it's good. It's really, really good. In the end, they'll be glad they watched it because it's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe I'm wrong about that.
Shauna, what did you think of Prisoners? There was a fantastic little on our text thread when we were talking about it, that Shauna's just like, oh my God, I just got to the part where Jake Gyllenhaal is at the
finds the basement with no stairs.
The basement with no stairs. Oh my God. And Ryan just wrote, I have nothing to say at this time.
I can't even inject anything in the middle of the movie.
It was a really wonderful Shauna moment. I loved that you sent that very much.
This movie is intense.
Yeah. How have I never seen this? This is crazy.
It's directed by French Canadian friend Denis. Say his last name, Joel?
Villeneuve. Yeah.
He's the best guy making movies right now, and this movie snuck in between. Doesn't really matter, but it came out right before Arrival, I guess, and right after the other movie he did with Jake Gyllenhaal, which is another challenging movie to watch that I didn't make you guys watch. So don't say I don't do anything for you.
Other one, Joel,
what's it called?
For Ryan, sorry.
It is I'm finding it right now. Night what is it? Let's see which one. There's Arrival, Sicario, Enemy. Yeah.
Enemy came right before Prisoners, right?
Yeah, Enemy, yeah. Prisoners and Enemy came out at the same year.
Sicario is a challenging movie too. I mean, he really, even his big budget movie, the Blade Runner sequel, was a challenging movie. Now he's got the first part of what he hopes is a Dune series coming out in September. We've talked about those because I'm big into science fiction. We talk about those all the time about it, being excited to see them. Or how did they make a Blade Runner sequel, and how could it? It's just shocking how good it is, and yet it's not exactly what people wanted. How could it have been? Those are the pitfalls of making a sequel to a classic. But Prisoners to me is kind of perfectly encapsulates what he's really, really good at, which is he creates this scenario, and we're gonna try not to spoil these three movies or all the big moments in them anyway, like we did our time travel movies last week or 2 weeks ago, where we just told you everything that happened completely. We're gonna try not to do that, but and to even talk about the inciting incident of the movie is a bit of a spoiler, because the movie is very clever about the way it builds up to it and how it puts you through it, the way the characters have to go through it, which is really the magic of this film. But it's about these two neighbor families who get together on Thanksgiving, and during the course of their Thanksgiving festivities, their two young daughters who are friends are abducted, and everything that follows after that. The parents are just real quick, and then I'll get back to letting you have your reaction. But the parents are played by Terrence Howard and Hugh Jackman, and
Maria
Viola
Bello
Davis.
And Viola Davis, yeah.
Viola Davis, and I can't remember the other woman's name.
Maria Bello.
Yeah, Maria Bello. So really good group of actors there, first off, who really put you through what they're going through. The hotshot cop assigned to the case is played by Jake Gyllenhaal. He's great in it. And suspect number one, I think it's not a huge spoiler to say, is Paul Dano. And if you need somebody to play an extreme anything, Paul Dano's always a solid choice, because he will go to the edge for you every time. But child abduction, the emptiness of your life and the helplessness of that. I mean, that's really what the bulk of the film focuses on. There's some deeper themes in it for sure, but making you feel that is what I think it's really, really good at. That the scene where suddenly they're just not, because there's no big abduction scene. It suddenly either your kids were playing and they went back to the house to get something and now they are gone. They are gone and you don't know where they are, and you don't even know how to react to that at first. Go ahead. Sorry. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, no, it is. It's a wild ride. I want to hear Shauna's thoughts if you wouldn't mind going first.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So I have a few things to say, of course. First of all, it was really interesting to me to see Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal in that combination. I thought it worked beautifully. It was, for whatever reason, it surprised me, and I really enjoyed it.
They're top-notch guys, and Gyllenhaal, he's pretty diverse cat, but Jackman is really playing against type in this film.
Jackman is, and right. Jake Gyllenhaal, his tics and mannerisms. Mm-hmm. I read a little bit about that, and I don't know how he did that. How you can have a tic that comes off so uncontrolled by somebody who doesn't have that tic without thinking about it while he's saying his lines and all of that. I mean, watching his performance in this was, for me, very enjoyable. I just was amazed.
Yeah, he's fantastic in it. I agree.
Yes. And then Paul Dano, I mean, he is the biggest creep in movie world ever. He just plays a creepy guy so well. They
bring in, about halfway through the movie, I'm not going to spoil the context of this, but they bring in the other most creepy guy on the planet just because why not?
Correct.
Let's just go full on creep. Played by a friend of ours, David. You'll have to say his last name for me, Joel. Sorry, David.
Where are you? It's Malkian.
Sorry, David, if we're getting that wrong. We're huge fans of yours.
Yeah,
but he plays the guy with the snakes, I guess we'll say, without spoiling too much.
Oh,
David. Yeah, he has this moment where he's obviously office rocker insane, but Jake comes to the door and has this sort of normal conversation with him, and he does this great job. So I always talk about how I love actors trying not to show you something. This dude's insanity is coming out of every pore. Literally, you can feel it as soon as you see him, mm-hmm. and yet he's just desperately trying to act normal, and he has this sort of kind of hiccup giggle that he does halfway through it, where the craziness just comes out. And Dano's a little different.
What's great about Paul Dano is I believe he's a guy who understands that he has essentially a baby face. He has such this round, youthful look. He's going to be 70 years old and he's still going to look like a kid.
Right.
And yet he is also an actor willing to go to these very dark, disturbing places, and just comfortably live there. And so as an actor, being able to do that and let that come out and having it in that package is really really fun. It makes it no matter where he's playing, whether, even in something like Swiss Army Man, it has to do with his understanding of what his appearance is, just what his looks, what that conveys on, through a lens, and then manipulating that to kind of subvert what you what your initial, emotional reaction might be, because he's not like this super handsome guy, but he's certainly not ugly. He's just, he has the look of an innocent, of very earnest. That there's just something about his countenance, about how what he looks like is very earnest.
But rightly or
so
wrongly, Hugh Jackman's character gets it in his head that this is the guy who did it, or if he didn't, that he knows something. He's a creepy guy who drives around town in an old blacked out Winnebago that they saw on their street that day. He listens to the creepiest 70s song, I think, of all time, Put Your Hand in the Hand of the Man by the Oceans, which I always thought was creepy, but it's this innocent, wonderful Jesus movement song from 1971 that's always playing on his old 8-track player or whatever, just like on a loop.
I think it's really interesting that, like, if you look at him in There Will Be Blood, and he plays twins, that one is a very simple brother.
A very understated performance, too.
Very much so.
Yep.
And then his twin is a crazy evangelical minister, but they're both, believable on the surface in the way that he presents it. And it's the same with this. On the surface, he's playing this guy that to everybody that's been watching the movie, I would assume he had done it, but
it's a fair assumption. I mean, it's the most logical assumption.
Right. But he plays, well, and not only that, you saw him in the Winnebago, and then you see him later, as the police are going after him. But then he also is supposed to be this guy that, probably has a mental disability, and everybody, I think, is it his aunt that, he couldn't do this. He's, he wouldn't have the wherewithal to pull this off. And
he probably can't even understand what you're asking him in the way that you think he might when you're talking to him. He just doesn't.
He doesn't understand the severity.
Nevertheless, and to me, this is the heart of the film. Jackman's a survivalist. We see him interacting with his son before the incident. He teaches him shooting and how to change tires, and he's that kind of dad who's just very hands-on. He's preparing his son to be this strong, independent dude that he is. He probably, we learn a little bit about what his past is, but he gets it in his head that this is the guy who did it. Like I said, it's a reasonable thing for him to believe that. I think we all agree with that.
Well, exactly.
But it's the way he comes after him. It's the way he takes the law into his own hands.
But
I think it's perfectly relatable. Maybe I'm more Terrence Howard than I'm Hugh Jackman in this movie. But at the same time, that idea that if I'm not doing something to help find my daughter, then what am I? I'm nothing. And he's just spurned and compelled into action, and his actions are extreme. And that's where you can sympathize, and yet you also you also sit in judgment of that one way or another. The movie forces you to make a decision about whether any of that's right or wrong. And they're hard questions that film is asking you.
The interesting thing, though, for me with Dano's character is when they're outside the police station, when he gets released, and he whispers to Hugh Jackman, and nobody else hears it except for Hugh Jackman and the audience. And all of a sudden you're just like, whoa. I mean, that was a big moment. It was so quick and quiet, but it then, like, as an audience member, all of a sudden, okay.
Well, because the movie's playing that trick on us, right? Gyllenhaal's trying to talk him off the edge, and he pretty much succeeds at it, getting him to back off. And then this, right when it needs to happen to ramp things up instead of calm things down, that moment happens. I agree with you. That's kind of the moment on which the movie turns.
It's essential because I feel like that's where it really brings in the intensity. I mean, it's intense the whole time, but this, all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, he just said that. And then as Terrence Howard and Hugh Jackman's characters, bring this, like you said, kind of vigilante type stuff, but in the back, you know, you're like, is he crazy? He's crazy. He's bringing this so crazy. But in the back of your head, you're like, I heard him whisper that.
Yeah. I heard what he said.
Am I crazy? You know, I mean, I think that how they built the suspense in this and how intense it was. Like when I sent you guys the message, I'm like, what is this? Oh my God.
Well, and the basement with no stairs, and there's this stuff that is connected, or how is it connected? We're not really sure. There's this whole other investigation sort of happening on the side that is extremely atmospheric and creepy, like in the very best way, like in a Silence of the Lambs kind of way. It really is sort of worthy of that. And you know, most movies it's probably connected somehow, but how your brain, I pretty much, no matter who you are, it's when you strain to figure it out, it's tricky. You can't you're just strung along by it. And you know, we won't talk about, we've kind of revealed almost too much about this. We won't talk about anything kind of that happens in the big build up to the big ending, which is extraordinary. But I just tell you, even when the thing has resolved itself, it leaves you with so many questions and so many frustrations. And I found it to be extremely powerful film that way for what was essentially just a standard mystery suspense thriller, which is really all it is in the end.
Mm-hmm.
I do have to say with the ending, and I'm not going to give it away.
There's a lot to talk about with that, so it's hard to do a show about it without wanting to talk about it. But yeah, don't give it away.
But just from a perspective of what my perspective is of the film, I didn't like the ending.
Yeah.
And the reason I didn't like the ending is I'm really hard of hearing. And I didn't hear what happened in the ending.
I see.
So I had to play it over and over again, louder and louder. And
to figure it out.
No, I couldn't hear it at all. I don't know if it's the tone. I can't hear. I had to go on the internet and look up what the heck just happened.
What is that? What is going on there?
What the hell just happened? Because all of a sudden the movie's just done.
There's an audio cue that
and in your defense, although you're right, there's an audio cue that helps you, just like there's an audio cue at the end of Inception. We sort of talked about that does reveal something to you, but whether you hear that or not, because I can promise you you don't have to be hard of hearing to not hear it. It is deliberately difficult to decipher because it requires the audience. Again, this is another way the movie challenges. It requires the audience to think something about the ending one way or another to figure out that answer on yourself. It does that very, very deliberately. There's an answer. I don't think it's up for debate necessarily, but he still sort of leaves it in this place where what you bring to it is what is going to happen there.
Right.
And I understand and respect that, but when you can't hear it at all, it's like, this does not make any sense at all.
Right.
Like, I don't know. So anyway, it is interesting. It was a very interesting film, extremely intense.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a hard horror movie. It's got torture in it of every kind.
Apparently it was
every kind of metaphorical and actual torture you can imagine is in it.
Apparently,
it's a tough film.
When it was released in the festival version of it was getting an NC-17 rating. And they had to go back and do another.
They had to trim little bits and pieces out of the hammer sequence to get it down.
Well, I can imagine if it was any worse than what more than what they showed.
Yeah.
Well, they did it all day long, and then in the final take of the final sort of ramp up, Denny came up to Hugh and said, he goes, "This last time, I want you to do it absolutely with absolute 100% ferocity," which he did, and that's what's in the film. And it is.
Yeah,
it
it's
make
amazing.
You gasp. It's just really something.
You know what? I want to watch it again.
Well, that's a sign of a good movie. I don't think Joel likes the movie, which is why he had
I did not like it.
You could just tell from his reactions that he didn't like it at all. But
so, Joel, was it hard for you to watch?
Well, I mean, the subject matter is difficult. Obviously, it's it's difficult. Having a 10-year-old who and my 10-year-old has a genetic condition which makes him predisposed to trust strangers.
Right.
It's so that, so yes, that was incredibly difficult. That was difficult to watch, or difficult to process the plot line through that. That being said, I didn't care for the movie. I thought that it was just red herring after red herring. I thought that Hugh Jackman went to the I'm yelling loudest, so that must mean that what I'm saying is important.
Yeah, I think that's the director's vision for the character as much as anything.
Sure, and I get that. I thought
but you're not wrong. That is what it is.
Terrence Howard and Viola Davis are criminally underused.
I think Howard has his moment, but I think both the wives are.
Well, yeah, I mean,
given the caliber of the performers that they have, they're from a script standpoint, they're not utilized very well. I would agree.
But I gotta say, and this has nothing to do with the fact that Loki right now is in the zeitgeist because of the Disney series and the whole Marvel universe, etc. But take all of that away. You name your detective. You name a character Loki.
Right.
That in itself is a giant. You're okay. Loki's the trickster god. So what am I seeing here? What you're just waiting.
Loki was the final Norse god to take on the job of protecting this child from a Titan that wanted to kill him after his father and brother had given up. That's the parallel between the story. That's why his name ended up in there.
Sure,
it's a Norse god thing and not a Marvel thing, obviously.
No, I know that. That's why I'm saying remove any knowledge of the Marvel universe and just go off the knowledge of the Norse god.
There's a parallel to a story that Loki goes through that the character is going through literally the same thing.
Yeah,
that's why he's named that.
There's
a weird name, even when I started watching it. But
are we still talking about Prisoners? Is there a link between Loki and Prisoners? I'm lost.
Yeah, the character's name is Detective Loki.
Name is Detective Loki.
Thank you.
So I'm like, if you're gonna go, So I hated Keller Dover as a person.
I think absent the Marvel universe, that name is not a problem at all in that story.
Yeah,
so I can't really set it aside like Joel's saying.
Yeah,
but I hear what you're saying. On the nuts is what it is. It's on the nuts. Little much,
but that story, that Loki story, if again, regardless of if there is a whole Marvel universe, take the Marvel universe, Loki is the trickster god. That story of Loki defending this child, blah blah blah, that is a lesser known part of Loki's Norse
I don't think
mythology.
So. I don't think if you study Norse mythology, it is. I think to an average person, maybe it is, but I think again, absent Marvel, to the average person, Loki has no meaning to most folks.
Sure.
Which is why I think when this was written, it probably was an innocent enough thing.
I
certainly not a deal breaker in any case. But
and then my biggest problem that I have with the film, and this could just be me, I look at Hugh Jackman's I shouldn't say Hugh Jackman's, but his character Keller Dover's when Keller Dover when Jake Gyllenhaal tells Keller Dover, ease off, go home, get away, he gets mad, but he does it.
Yes.
When a simpleton, a person who is cognitively disabled, someone who is not quote unquote normal, Hugh Jackman has no problem assaulting and taking advantage of this and getting this guy and saying, and I'm gonna, asserting his his manliness, his survivalist things against someone who he perceives as a lesser person. And I don't feel that it's just, well, this is a father doing what he's doing what he has to do. It is
Right.
a bully picking on someone who he knows is weaker.
Right. That is absolutely a part of it. I agree with you.
And that enraged me, that we're supposed to just be, oh, but he's a dad and he's just trying to get the answers.
I don't think he's the hero of the story, man. I think you are supposed to recognize that in him.
And I should,
because he's a bully before he even starts picking on this character. We see that right off the top.
He's certainly one of the main protagonists.
Yeah, but again,
and I really, we're again. So
I don't disagree with anything you're saying. I think that's spot on.
I do have a question, though. I have a question. Excuse me, Joel, and I appreciate what you're saying completely, but maybe up until Paul Dano whispers something to him, yes, but I wonder, and I'm just thinking,
mm-hmm.
Paul Dano was in the RV, and his son, or Hugh Jackman's son, was saying, Dad, this guy was in there, this is what happened, telling him that.
We don't know that Paul Dano was in the RV.
We don't. It's true. They never show him in the RV.
Okay, but we don't know that yet.
Right. That's a really challenging thing about the film. I agree. We think he pretty much sure he is, but is he? We don't know that. We
don't know that until the cops go after him. And then
they find him in the RV.
They find him in the RV. Not only do they find him in the RV, but he drives, the way he's acting.
Yeah.
And everything that Hugh Jackman knows from the circumstances and the RV, and then the cops get him, and then he does all of this. I think he's already thinking, I don't think that what you're portraying is real. And
right.
Then when Dano is released and he whispers that to him, with the person that, that Paul Dano's character has presented as being, and I don't know how to
ruin the thing, but having some knowledge that he hasn't shown before.
I don't want to be disrespectful to, the character that he presented. Simple, not, he acted like he might be a third grader in his mental awareness and everything. And that's how he's treated. But I think Hugh Jackman from the very beginning saw
it's an actor, doesn't believe it.
Yes. So is he a bully? Absolutely. Otherwise as well. And if he had been bullying a person that did not show any of the opposite, absolutely, of, somebody with a mental disability, I totally agree. But I think that's part of the story. And that's why I think it's so important that they had Paul Dano whisper to him, and we're all like, oh my God, But then the rest of the movie.
But Joel's not wrong. I mean, I get Joel saying, I can't even go an inch with this guy because of what he is. I feel like the movie, even if you sympathize with him, you should still kind of feel the same way. We all feel differently, but this guy is marching to his own doom, whether it's literally the end of him or whether it's just simply that his soul is whatever, it's going to be gone at the end of this exercise that he's being put through. And yet you take away the person's child and it's like, this is what this guy has in his toolbox. So of course this is what he's doing. And I agree with Shauna that he's spurned on to do it to some degree. I sympathize with him, but I don't approve of anything he does. I mean, I want to make that clear. It's
sure.
And I don't think the movie expects you to. I think it expects you to be really repelled by the abduction within the abduction story that we are all a party to. You see Howard, he's also a parent. I mean, to me, he does come through on screen because he has that moment where, he's and I don't think it's out of weakness. I think he just is a moral person who can't stand this under any circumstances. The film represents that to some degree, and that's what I liked about it. That's the quandary. Where do you land here? Even if you wouldn't do this, where are your sympathies throughout this whole thing? It's tough in that way. That's where the movie, I think, is at its toughest.
I agree. And I think that's the point of it, is what you're bringing up, Joel, is, this bully, and Ryan, what you were saying, Hugh Jackman goes to crazy extremes.
He does.
To the point where, as an audience member, you only heard Paul Dano whisper that. That's really the only thing that you really saw him ever show of that side. So I would be watching these extreme torture scenes and thinking, am I crazy? Did I not hear Paul Dano do this? Because I am so repelled by this.
Right.
I mean, it was like an internal struggle, like, for me too.
But Joel's a good person. I can see why you're just repelled beyond the line of being able to be into a movie. I get it. It won't be for everybody. It's an extreme film. That was the point of it, for sure.
He's
but I think the movie's more on your side than you think. That's all I'll say on that.
Yeah,
I really do think it is.
I felt like he was. I guess I felt watching it like I felt like we were supposed to like be rooting for him. And I'm like, this is.
I wasn't. I mean, I wanted him to find his daughter. That's where it's complicated. You get where the motivation comes from, but.
I will also say I did not like the ending as well. I didn't like it for different reasons.
We'll talk about that when the curtain comes down. We really can't ruin the ending, or there's no point for anyone to even see this.
So because I think that, but aside from my personal feelings towards the movie, it's executed wonderfully.
Yeah.
It's moody, it's dark, it's got the use of frankly of weather, I guess, for lack of a better term.
No, I agree.
The atmosphere that all of these things create. To me, there's a radio. At the beginning, there's a radio broadcast where they're talking. The radio's on briefly at the very top of the movie when Hugh Jackman and his son are in the car. That's talking about the weather forecast and stuff like that, and it clicks up. And you kind of clock what they're saying. There's a scene later on with Jake Gyllenhaal driving at a high rate of speed, and given everything that has happened in this movie, I'm just that to me was the most nerve-wracking part, knowing because of the weather. Right. And I'm like, and then I realized, oh, that was awesome. That was great. That feeling, and the understanding after the fact that the reason why I was so into that moment was because of this little weather blurb early on in the film. I'm like, oh, that was great. I love that. That was awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's got Roger Deakins shooting the thing. It was beautifully shot. Just the establishing shots, the dam and the factory, the sense of a very real place. Oh, that dam shot, that shot coming over with it. Oh yeah. Coming over the river.
First units don't shoot their own establishing shots. That's really, really unusual. And Denis didn't necessarily either, but he had Deakins at his disposal, and they really wanted those things to not be things that were taken for granted in the film. They wanted to go back to this other way of, if we're going to spend 6 seconds showing you something, it's got to be more than just, we're here now. It's got to have a sense the dread of the thing and the meaning of the thing, and that shot stands out to me. But there's a bunch of those in the movie that are
there's a
really
bunch
good.
of shots, yeah, from a lot of the nighttime shit. Yeah, the use of there's a nighttime scene that happens over the course of several people's yards, and the use of essentially automatic sensor lights that go off when you go. I'm like, oh, that was great. That was really, that's a wonderfully conceived so I so my personal feelings aside, it's a well executed, it's a
you can admire it without being
yeah.
able to really enjoy it on any sort of normal level.
Yeah. So I don't want people taking away that I think that this is a movie not worth ever being made. It's just
it
I
tests
personally
you,
didn't
and
like
it tests you, and you bailed at a point where I think it's perfectly legitimate for a normal person to just say, enough of this, I can't stand this. I really do think that's part of the point of it. It doesn't expect everybody to get through that stuff. But I do think that guy's a bully. The film shows us that before any inciting incident in his life has occurred. It shows it in a subtle way, at least at that point, but you get that sense that he is ready to be unlaunched into something should anything extreme happen. When the end of the world comes, he's ready to kill.
I disliked him before the kids even were taken.
There is that. Yeah, he's a very let me put it this way.
Sort of dude.
Yeah, let me put it this way, though. I think there are some people that saw him at the beginning of the film and really felt like that's a man.
Oh, I'm sure.
And
so it was, and so that it's
you're not wrong.
But all right, last thoughts on The Prisoners before we move on.
I think we summed it up. It's
okay.
Pretty good. Like I said, this was challenging movies. I thought this film, I'll just say this about it since we didn't spoil anything. This film offers up relief in a few ways that made it tolerable for me to get to the end.
Sure.
Because I have to say, if it just continued on its sort of mid-second act trajectory to the end, I think you'd have just been, I couldn't have taken it. So
and I get
that's my invitation to the people listening.
I also and to go back to what Shauna said and what you're saying, Jake Gyllenhaal's performance, his character, he does his character is so wonderfully fleshed out that he does, just by his very nature of some of the things that his character does, it does provide this great little release of some tension. His character is he's really fun to watch in this. He has a very
non-Hollywood relationship with his boss too that I really enjoyed. Very not cliche. This guy who runs the department isn't on his case or hassling him or doing any of the usual junk. He's lost. When something serious and awful happens, this sort of politician / chief of police guy he has one tool with which he can turn to help him through it, and it's this guy who just somehow can figure these awful, unsolvable mysteries out. I liked that too as a sort of side thing that was neat about the film.
It was, again, and I guess, park that in the atmosphere that Denis Villeneuve created for this film. So, okay, well, so let us move on to a not so intense film. But the movie is Nebraska, Alexander Payne's Nebraska, starring Bruce Dern and Will Forte, June Squibb, who is one of my
Oscar nominated.
I love June Squibb, and Bob Odenkirk amongst others.
And Stacy Keach. He's probably the other guy you need to say by name.
Yeah. So Nebraska was my movie choice. Again, not and it was intentional because I was the last one to choose a movie, and I fully acknowledge that part of me was like, I'm not going to subject everybody to another
You
intense.
had quite a
brutal-
list actually of ones that I only knew about half of them, but I knew they were
They
tough.
they would have been, and rightfully Ryan was like, "Are you sure that maybe with it?" And then I'm like, "Oh, what about Nebraska? What about Nebraska?" Because Nebraska essentially is dealing with essentially what happens when your parents grow old. When you're watching, your own, your own life kind of is, you feel maybe like you're spinning wheels and your parents are getting elderly. And in this case, Bruce Dern plays a guy who, well, we come to find out that he hasn't always had the strongest relationship with reality, but it's certainly in his older age. We meet Bruce Dern walking along the highway.
The fantastic long opening shot of him walking up what looks like some sort of entrance ramp, kind of.
Yeah, he's literally walking
to
along
an interstate
the
of some
in
kind,
Montana,
and it's the slow approach of this police vehicle behind him. That, how are you doing?
Like,
do you know where you are? Where you're going? He points. Where do you live? And he points back behind him.
Yeah.
Wordless performance by him. It's genius opening.
Yeah, and so
all in black and white. It's black and white scope.
Mm-hmm.
Just real quick, and then I'll let you continue. I'm sorry, but Alexander Payne wanted to make this movie for a long time. Wanted to make it in black and white. Nobody'd let him make it in black and white. So he had to wait. He had to wait until after he made Decemberist, because that was such a big hit and so acclaimed that it gave him the clout to basically do whatever he wanted on his next film. And this was your, here you go, son. Here, make whatever you want. It's always very telling to me, because accomplished directors, if they're lucky, at a couple points during their career, but at least at one point, they hit that place where they're on top of the world and they're let to do whatever they want. And Alexander Payne, whatever he does in the future, this was his moment and this is his film. And I think it says a lot about him that this is what he did.
He said, he had Sideways, and that was this big critical and awards darling. And then Descendants. Descendants? Yeah, Descendants. Was a solid critical and box office success. And so, you're right. It sort of all hit at the same time as the awards were coming in for Sideways. He gets to release this other film that does really well and it's really popular. And so then he turns around and is able to make the
this way he wanted.
Black and white
they still
film,
test audienced it before they would let him do it in black and white. Like they had a big deal. It's like, just let every once in a while, just let it's not like he wrote some impenetrable mystery of a script. Let him just do his thing. Of course, he didn't write the script at all.
This is one of the few ones few movies that he's made that he didn't write. And other than, a couple tweaks here and there, apparently. Yeah. But the idea is you have Bruce Dern is an older man who believes he has to get to Lincoln, Nebraska to collect $1 million.
I mean, he believes he's won the lottery because of one of those publisher things he's gotten in the mail that says he may have. He just, the prophetic line, he just believes the things that people tell him is what his son says about him. And he gets single-minded about getting his $1 million in a way where he cannot be stopped.
Yeah. And he's kind of he's pretty angry in his old age. He is, he's frustrated. He's a guy who, has always kind of given in to drink, not really there. And Will Forte and Bob Odenkirk play his sons, but Will Forte is sort of the main son.
Where are they from? They're Billings, Montana.
Billings, Montana. Yeah,
the biggest city in Montana. That's not saying a lot, though.
Yeah.
But Odenkirk is it's saying something. It's where the local television station is. Odenkirk plays the anchor on Billings News
he's
Tonight,
a guy who's getting a shot now, and he's Will Forte sort of feeling like he's like, my brother has all this other stuff on his plate. My dad is
Not going to stop till he gets to Lincoln. So
yeah, and so he's like, well, let's just take him and get it out of his system. Because they're like, Dad, you haven't won $1 million. You don't know what you're talking about. And he's like, but this says I have the paper. And he was like, okay, well, let's go. You know what? Let's go. It's essentially calling his bluff to the, or like, to the most.
Doesn't
extreme.
happen all at once. It's several different picking him up at the police stations, and but eventually it's not the worst idea in the world. Fine, Dad, let's go to Lincoln and get your $1 million. Like, if that's the only thing that's going to keep you from wandering out of the house at night, out onto the highway on foot in Montana in the winter, then yes, let's go to Lincoln together. I'm willing to do that for you.
Yep. And June Squibb, who plays his wife, has just long given up. She's just like, whatever. I'm done.
What do you want me to do? I can't.
What do you want me to do? He just, I can't stop him.
They're home in Montana. All the homes really featured in this are so wonderful in their own way. June is fantastic in it. I mean, they're the kind of couple they are on screen is because they don't have a ton of screen time together. Thankfully they get more at the end when you least expect them to, but in the early goings, it's just a very believable family unit in a kind of wonderful way, even though it's a pretty stylized movie. The stylization isn't much in characterization, I would say. It's more in the visual telling of it all, which is neat. So it's this mix of very earthy performances with very showy cinematography and stuff, which I dug.
I like that they don't show a ton of their couple, in the beginning, because he's this guy that keeps disappearing and trying to get to Nebraska on foot, right. And they're picking him up constantly. And she's like, I'm done. And, she's salty and crabby and I'm done with him. And if he decided he wanted to be a millionaire, why couldn't he have done it earlier and worked for it? It's the stuff that you're like, wow, she's crabby, but yeah, she makes a lot of sense in the beginning. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah,
everything she says seems really super well earned. The two brothers never show up at the house if they're not bringing over or bringing away laundry. I found that very telling. There's no conversation about it, but you see it more than once, which shows you sort of the nature of their connection there. It's, is still this very, well, going to mom, so she's going to bring all this laundry. I don't know why I think that's funny, but it's awesome. I'm a little removed from that, but not too far removed from having that kind of relationship with my own folks. So I kind of get it.
I also liked how with the brothers as it went on, and the older brother, I believe the news anchor was like, why do you care? Why do you care if he gets there? He was never there for us. He drank all the time. He never did anything for us, and at first the black and white was kind of like, what the hell, what's going on? But it drops away and it gives kind of a starkness to it that I really enjoyed. And the ambiance, or the music is very much like Sideways, so it kind of puts you in this depressed, like, oh, where's the hope, where's the future? He's gonna die in a few years anyway, why don't you just let him have this one thing? And then traveling, like you guys said, with the houses through Nebraska, I'm like, oh my god, this is so small town, middle America. This is where my grandparents had a farm, and all the time that I spent, I could identify with so much of just that small town, the houses, people at the bar. And at first it would, when I would kind of be watching it, I could feel myself just kind of becoming depressed. It like brought me down to this level, but then I kind of leveled out and I was like, okay, here we go. And I ended up loving this movie. I loved it.
It's easy to love, I have to say. I mean, I really do believe that. I think in that way, it's not very challenging. I think if you have an open heart approach to watching these stories at all, this one should get under your skin, because it's the dumbest adventure movie of all time. Really, you could call it a road trip movie, which it is, but it is a template of an adventure movie, and they go through these trials and tribulations and things. And but what really happens is this family unit, mostly it's a father and son thing, but it really is the whole family in the end, because of these challenges and because they've gone out their front door and hit the road to one degree or another. They've taken on these new things in their lives that have brought parts of themselves out that they're not used to seeing from each other. And they truly get to know themselves this way. The father gets to know his son in a way that he wouldn't otherwise. Certainly the son learns more about his father than he had ever known or would have ever known if they hadn't done this. Like, there's that aspect to it that I find super, other than just the comedic beats. And
I think what you're talking about right now is the point of this movie. Right. And that's what I enjoyed about it the most. And it wasn't even figuring out about the sons. It was figuring out about this guy. Okay. Mm-hmm. You know, he believes anybody. He's drank most of his life. You know, he's got this wife that's crabby with him, and his sons, you know, he's never done anything for us. So there's this part of him that's shown up until they get to Nebraska, and the younger son who brought him on the trip meets his former girlfriend. Mm-hmm. And his former girlfriend,
who's the editor of the local small town newspaper there, right? Is that correct?
They're going to write a piece on
about him being a millionaire or whatever.
Right. And the son goes in and says, you know what? This is all a con job. It's not real. And she starts talking about, is it Wally? What is his name? The father? Woody. Yes, thank you. And she's like, yeah, you know, your mom won. She got him. He was such a nice guy. He was the nicest guy. And all of a sudden there's this version of Woody that has not been shown by anybody. You just see him as confused. You see his family reacting to him and his drinking and all of this. And all of a sudden, here comes this piece where this woman is like, he is an amazing guy. Yeah. I ended up getting married, and I was happy, and I'm still happy, and had children. But this really was my guy. But your mom won. And that's the first inkling. It's like, okay, his mom won. What's that all about?
It's a very small town way looking of getting hooked up and getting married after school, really.
Yeah.
They're all they're not thinking about heading off to New York or whatever to find their lives. They're looking around going, who amongst these people am I going to spend my life with? And I got that. That was very, very cool. Go ahead, Joel.
Sorry, go ahead, Shauna.
It offered you a first picture of, so what's with the wife? You know what I mean? It gave you like a clue, like, okay, maybe. Okay.
Well, and then I'll let you go, Joel, but that, without spoiling the exact moment, but there's a moment where Woody's wife, she doesn't have to do this, but there's this moment where they're being come at by a lot of different factions and things, and it's her that steps up and makes the case for him, sort of makes the final case for him in a kind of amazing way.
Let's come to that though, Ryan. That's
later.
I don't want to get ahead of it, because there's just so much here that goes into it.
Sure.
Yeah, there's, I mean, one of the reasons why, I mean, the movie challenges me in a wonderful way. Again, I adore this movie. It is I sort of have a similar relationship in the sense that, you know, I think I know my parents, and then you know, now as I'm an adult here, I'm still finding out all of these things that no one ever, you know, they certainly never talked about, none of their friends, you know, and you like these little nuggets of who they were in the before times, you know, in their youth and their, you know, when they were in their teens and 20s and stuff. And it's like, you just sort of like, the lenses of how you view your parents just keep changing. How it's like you see Will Forte, just going, that the lens by which he has viewed his dad his entire life just keeps getting altered, and sometimes altered for, man, I had no idea that's amazing. And other times it's like, I had no idea, what a dick.
Right.
And it's, it's that constant, and I think, when I first saw this movie, years ago, I really connected to that as a how I view my relationship with my parents. I didn't know that my mother was married to someone else before my dad until I was in my 30s.
Wow.
When I stumbled across my mom and dad's marriage certificate, and my mom's maiden, the name of my mom's name was not her maiden name. And I'm like, what is this? And she goes, oh, you know about Marlon. And I was like, I do not know about Marlon. And so it's like, oh yeah, I was married to Marlon. And she had told me this whole story as if I should know it. And
Sorry, Mom,
and
did
it
I
was
miss that family dinner that you told everybody?
yeah. And so then I went to my and I put some of this on me too, as a pretty self-absorbed person, especially. I mean, I still sort of am, but in my youth, especially, I was. But like, I went to my brother and I'm like, did you know Mom was married before then? He's like, yeah, Marlon. Yeah, he died. Yeah. And I'm like,
Good Lord.
What?
Wow.
So it's that lens by which that's so that's one of the reasons why I really connect to this movie. I really get really I get, I keep using the word challenged by it, but it really makes me really think about I think about my parents' mortality. I'm fortunate right now that I still have both of my parents are alive. But I know that's not always going to be the case. And I know that I'm going to be facing that sooner rather than later. And so it's, that's what, and that was one of the reasons why this movie jumped into my brain when we were talking about this show. So
The reason I like this so much is that it's not necessarily challenging to the viewer necessarily. It's challenging to the characters. You can see that they're being challenged by all of this, and you go along with them. But I just love that it's Dern's character, and it's not just a son or the sons, it's also his wife. It's also family members. It's also, the jerk that stole the air compressor. All of this.
Right, borrowed the air compressor and never gave it back.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's the middle act of the movie, which we talked about the newspaper article, which is important, but that, they're driving by his old hometown and, hey, Dad, why don't we stop in and see your brother? And, we haven't been here in a long time. And he's just, why? He's like, doesn't get it. He doesn't understand the novelty of that at all. But of course he shows up. Rance Howard, the great Rance Howard, plays his brother. That you can tell that they're brothers. There's, it's really, what does his sister-in-law say? No, you Strode brothers or whatever sure are men of little words or whatever,
Yeah.
But his nephews, those two guys, they're hilarious in it. The town neighbor who, I don't know we don't learn much about him, but we don't need to. Stacy Keach shows up and we know exactly who this guy is. He's not a bully in the sense that Hugh Jackman in Prisoners is a bully. He's
a bully.
He is a bully, but it's
bully.
But in a different way. He has a certain amount of charm, and he sort of charms his way into
slimier.
People.
Exactly.
He's a bully in the sense that he's always been, king of the mountain. of
Right,
this small little mountain,
and remain so of the small little mountain. And it is the guy whose same jokes you have to listen to every time he comes to the bar, all that stuff. I'm just saying we've talked about a certain kind of bully. I want to make sure this dude isn't confused.
Yeah, he's not a beat up kind of guy. It's I'm going to remind you that I once threw a touchdown in this game.
Right. And I'm never, ever going to accomplish anything else, but I'm going to keep reminding you of that for forever.
And the whole
Because
town,
in a small town, and in a small town like that, it still holds weight.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Stacy Keach's genius in the film, him and Bruce Dern are the yin and yang of acting styles, of just everything. It's really brilliant casting by everyone involved. And again, this extended family, I'll let you guys talk about the details about it to the degree that you want to, but without spoiling too many of the reveals and bits and moments, it's these interactions really in the center of the film that are the most important thing.
And I like what they do is each character, as they kind of introduce who this person is to Bruce Dern's character. Bruce Dern is this confused, quiet, drinks too much, doesn't pay attention, all of that. But then you find out, his wife thought everybody was trying to get into her pants, and she would point it out about every single male character in the town. And the best part for me was when she was at the cemetery and she's talking about this guy that's dead, and she's like, he wanted to get in my pants too. And Will's character walks away and she lifts her dress and is like, now don't you wish you wouldn't have been talking about the wheat so much?
This is what you missed. This is what you missed out.
Hysterical. But this buildup of her, and you realize, oh my God, listen to her and the way she talks about everybody else, and is just, why he drank. I would have drank too if she was my wife, And then you meet, and I'm sorry, what was the bully's name again?
I can't remember. We didn't say it.
Stacy Keach. The character's name is, oh my gosh, it is, come on, where's my cast list? There it is. Ed Pegram.
Yes. So
singing In the Ghetto at karaoke night,
God,
at the Bonanza or wherever they are. Holy crap, that's funny.
Right. Ed ends up basically threatening the family if he doesn't get money.
Right.
From the winnings.
That's the really sad, dark thing is that everybody wants his money now that he has money. It's
and
depressing.
That's what it is. All of these family members and they all come out of the woodwork and they're like, we deserve money. Do you know how much money that we gave you? Or gave him? And the wife, she does have these moments where I think she's realizing too who her husband is, and is coming to his defense. Where do you think you got all the money for your beauty shop? When my parents croaked. So she's like, I have records of
how much
of the
all of it.
When she essentially does the I have receipts
to repair your cars for decades.
Right.
Nothing.
And I think
maybe his business would still be around if it weren't for that.
Right. He had nothing. He gave everything away. That's why he drank. And I think it's the mother realizing this, the family members,
the sons are hearing it.
All this, the sons are realizing it. It's like, oh my God, this person who I've been thinking this my whole life, I had no idea. And then they go to his childhood home and he said, this is my parents' room. And this is where I got whipped and all of this. And he says, I guess nobody's going to be whipping me now. And they flashed to the wife and the sons. All of this was so brilliant. And I just,
it's a story of discovery, and it's awesome. It really is a good movie. Super, super good.
It's so good.
And despite the inherent darkness in people, it's a buoyant comedic film that really keeps you engaged on several levels throughout in a sort of masterful way. The comedy's not there to provide relief. It's ingrained into the thing.
It's the
You know what I mean?
story.
So it doesn't have to do this
Comedy
balancing
is the
act. It's
story.
yeah,
And it's
life
so-
is this. It
it's
is
so
comedy. It is
natural that-
tragedy.
It's so natural you can't help but burst out laughing like, oh God,
No,
of
truly.
course happened.
And you know, and yeah, I think that's why, you know, casting Will Forte, casting Bob Odenkirk and June Squibb, these are, you know, they're not punchline comics. They're not
Right.
jokey. They're the humor from them comes, you know, any of Will Forte's characters on Saturday Night Live or in Last Man on Earth, it comes from his the comedy comes from his, you know, just his inherent Will Forte-ness.
Yeah.
And you know, same with Bob
His-
Odenkirk.
my favorite scenic moment in the whole thing is his apartment. This movie takes place with the present day, which would have been 2013, but he has this 1994 apartment, like to the T. It's got the couches with the massive double stacked cushions like they used to have. He's got the big wireless phone with the big silver buttons on it. Like just everything about it was bought whenever he got out of college, like at this certain time. It has this so specific specificity to it. I don't know, that I took joy in that. You know, I really dug that he's a character out of time as well. He's still selling stereo equipment to people, which is, I mean, it's people still buy stereo equipment, but it's not a thing like it used to be. You don't buy it like you buy a car,
like Audio King or something like that. You know, it was, and I think every part of the movie was kind of like that too. I
agree.
At the end when they're at their aunt's house, and pretty soon, you know, first it was just the aunt and uncle and the brothers and, you know, Woody and the son, and then comes the mom, and then comes some more.
All the furniture she has to trot out to accommodate all these people is really funny.
And it's so awesome. I love the scene where everybody's in the same room watching the TV, and the audience is the TV.
Yeah.
So everybody's facing you, and at this point, there's brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles and everybody.
It's awesome.
Do you still drive that Chrysler? I never had a Chrysler.
I never had a Chrysler.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, you did. No,
Yeah,
I never did.
Cars like that anymore. Those things.
I had a
never
Chevy.
quit running.
Oh yeah, the Chevy.
To that Buick, it quit running.
And then that moment, and then the moment of silence, and then 2 days to drive from Billings. You know, the discussion about how long it took them to drive was
whether they're making good time or not.
Yeah, that hit a little too close to home for someone with with my family. All right, let's move on. Let's move on to our final film. This was the impetus of this whole show. Shauna chose Shauna's selection for our movie club was the hilarious comic romp Dead Man Walking. Real quick, I will say that I remember after seeing this for the first time, and I vividly remember the lights coming up in the movie theater and just going, oh. So so that was.
So that's partly why I chose it. You know, thinking about movies that really like caused me to think and just wow. And that's this movie. I had only watched it once, the first time when it came out back in '95.
I had watched it twice, but for me, for a movie I've owned 3 different ways in all these years, to have only watched it in the theater and then once during COVID, that was the second time I watched it, and I just watched it again to make sure I'd have it fresh in my mind. But it isn't a movie when you see it on the shelf, even though you love it, and even though it's good, you don't go, oh, let's just pop that in. It's just simply not that kind of film. There has to be some sort of agenda, honestly, to get it.
It's like Brokeback Mountain.
Yeah.
I have that movie and I haven't watched it again. I like the movie. I think it's amazing.
Proud to have it on the shelf, but not watching it very often. I get
it.
it.
It is not an easy movie, and that's what this is like. So it's funny when I turned it on to watch it again for the show. Right away, I was like, oh God, Shauna, why did you do this?
I said the exact same thing when I started it. I went, oh, Shauna, why did you do this?
Yeah, what are you doing to us?
Yes. So that being said, I'll explain it really quick. It's a movie about a convicted murderer that is sitting on death row, and he's basically due to be executed in a brief amount of time. He doesn't know in the beginning of the movie, I don't think, when exactly. But he's on death row and he writes a letter, and the letter gets into a nun's hands, and they strike up a relationship as far as it's hard to
Writing
call
back
it a
and forth a
friendship.
couple of times. Yeah.
Yeah, they write back and forth, and she ends up going in and meeting him. And she'd never worked with anybody on death row before. I don't think she had even been in a prison before. And they end up talking, and she goes back. He doesn't think she's going to return. She does. And then they continue to build this relationship as he's trying to fight for a stay of execution to, stop the execution.
Right. It's made pretty clear that early in the story that he's trying to get a stay of execution. That's exactly right. His appeals process is maturing. His date is coming. I don't think they announced it at the beginning either, but it's imminent. Yeah. And there's billboards all over the state of the governor saying how tough on crime he is. Like they're not expecting help from anywhere, but she helps get him assigned to a caseworker who just does death penalty defense cases for free. I mean, it all has to be free or it doesn't work. So she gets him in touch with that and gets sort of wrapped up in his life. But it's made very clear in the film. Even the lawyer says, she's like, well, I don't think it's okay that he should just be set free or anything. And he's like, he's not going to be set free. He was there. I mean, that's established. This is really about whether the state's going to kill him or not.
Yeah, really this is really about. Just trying to get him life in prison instead of being executed. That is it.
Which, even though he's talks tough, and we get a different version of him played by Sean Penn, depending on what mood he's in, or he's scared, basically. I mean, this is what we learn about him in the movie. He's scared, and he acts out, that fear acts out in all these crazy ways. He comes at her, he gives these weird interviews, he's doing all this stuff, and he didn't even really know why he's doing it. That's how we kind of act when we have fear eating at us someplace deep inside. And she's a fascinating character, because this nun played by Susan Sarandon in her best role ever, and she's had some humdinger of roles, but her Oscar-winning role just sort of always has an answer for him. And she believes, because she's accused several times, what are you doing with this murderer, this rapist, evil murderer with this swastika tattoos and stuff? Why are you even talking to him?
Nobody else will even talk to him, and all of a sudden she is, and she's getting into the press. And her
even Scott Wilson as the chaplain in the prison is like, why are you being friendly with him? What are you doing? And she's like, well, he asked me for help, and I'm here to help people. I mean, I help people. That's what I do. And at the end game, she makes pretty clear, is to help him with his soul, whatever happens. I feel like that's why I'm here.
That's what's so interesting to me, is that
but that's hard. Even religious people, even Catholics, say we're here for your soul. But man, when you are put to the test like this,
she's not trying to be his friend. I mean, she's not poo-pooing anything when he comes on to her. Right. She's like, what are you doing? You're on death row, and here you are playing your dumb games. You're trying to come on to me. What is this serving you? Yeah. He gave an interview and basically came off as a Nazi and all of this. She's like, why would you do that? You make it really hard for us to help you when you do this. But not poo-pooing him, even though he's by this time figured out, he's got 6 days or something till he's going to be executed. She's not letting him go. She's not saying, she's saying, what are you doing? Face up to what you're doing. This isn't helping you.
She believes in a hardcore sort of deeply religious way, that the only way for this guy to find peace, either executed or not, is for him to confess this,
to admit it.
open and honestly. It's the only way for him to be saved in her eyes.
Yes.
And she's always, without cajoling him or without, she's always
trying, necessarily saying it outright either.
Right. But she's always trying to get him to that point for his own good.
Right.
And it's a powerful push and shove to watch.
Right.
He doesn't want to face the reality of what he's done at all.
Lying about it. He's saying he didn't do it. The other guy did it.
The other guy went crazy.
Yes. And he's not taking any accountability. And through this, as you're watching their relationship development and the push back and forth, they're showing scenes of the murder. They're showing that it was in the woods. They're showing that it's a car. And then
Joel, real quick, Peter Sarsgaard's the male. It's his first movie. He plays the murder victim. And Missy, I can't remember her name, Yeager, I want to say, who's also an accomplished actor. Her first movie was this woman in this crime scene. And I probably, just to protect myself from it, I just start thinking about the technical aspects of acting it, shooting it at night, getting muddy and stuff. Like, I just can't, I had a hard time. The first time through, I let it wash over me and it was tough. This time through, I was like, well, wow, that's interesting. Like, anything to not deal with that incident directly, because it is horrific. But those two actors, and really everyone involved, the other two too, the murderers, frankly, just reliving that sort of thing all night for a couple of nights in a row. Even that is hard to fathom, let alone what the incident like that might have actually been like. Just reenacting it is hard to fathom, I have to say.
But it's interesting how they did it throughout the relationship. They just show bits and pieces that, didn't right away show what happened or who did what or anything like that. They set the environment and the atmosphere. And then as this is going on, they also start showing the parents of the kids, the couple,
the survivors of the victims.
Yes.
And this is the most important part of the movie.
Yes. Well, yes. And it's the struggle between the murderer and the parents. And it's, he's the murderer. It's,
R. Lee Ermey, of all people, R. Lee Ermey and Raymond J. Barry, who almost exclusively play redneck Nazis and villains and military guys, play these two fathers of these two people. It's just stunning, and the mothers as well. But it's just stunning that they've been given the opportunity to do this kind of role in this kind of film. Ermey's really effective, like he always is. But just want to focus on Raymond J. Barry for a second. The way he's dealing, he's Catholic, so he reaches out to her in a very pointed and yet very sort of respectful way. Why did you not come to us? Why didn't you come to us to help us? Right. Like he just doesn't get it and is grappling with it. He's clearly a man of conscience. Raymond J. Barry, just taking my breath away in this movie, is so good because his struggle is our struggle in the film. Truly, we're getting to know this murderer a little bit. We can't help but take up his cause to a certain degree. Like it's the movie's cause, right? To be against the death penalty, which I am personally. Like, it should be easier to do. We're certainly on Susan Sarandon's character side, Sister Prégine, but that's the mechanics of the thing. Then, right when you think you are in a story that you understand where your allegiances are, these parents come in, and I mean, his parents too, the murderer's mother. It just throws you for a loop emotionally, and you really can't. It does not allow you to emotionally settle in any conventional way. I'll just say that, and that's the strength of the thing.
And I would say it's interesting because it ties to Prisoners really well. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Prisoners, you have the parents, and sure, the parents are torturing the guy that they thought killed, but
it's a question of where your allegiances are,
but it's also understanding where they come from. These are the parents. Their kids have been raped and murdered. Right. how could you not support them wanting the death penalty?
And it ties into Nebraska in the same way, in that we learn who these kids were. They're not just victim number one and victim number two. We learn, particularly the daughter, we learn through her folks' stories, the way her mother, I can't remember who the actor is, but the way her mother tells the story of her daughter's graduation and what her plans were, mixed with the details of this murder that happened. Like, she can't untangle the two, that she can't just tell one thing and leave the other aside. It gets all mixed in this really painful sort of up and down testimony that she has. And, you know, and just the appearance of the victim's sister in the scene, and all of it's just so,
do you know
so
who
powerful.
Do you know who that actress is?
Yeah.
Eva Murray, the sister
Yeah.
that comes in. That's Susan Sarandon's daughter.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, you know, you become very emotionally tied to the parents and what they're going through. At the same time, Sean Penn's acting like a lying murderer, you know, as you're seeing all
lying murderer Nazi, like, what's to like there?
And then they bring in Sean Penn's family with the mother and Jack Black playing the older brother, you know, and which was
a very early role for him.
Very good. But then you see their relationship with him and how he is to them, you know, how he's protective of the younger brother and how he doesn't want to upset his mother. And all of a sudden you're seeing this humanity in him and their humanity for the way that they care for him, and know that he's going to be murdered, or executed rather, at midnight of the last day that they get to see him, you know. So it's like, it's humanity. It's the pulling of the humanity of understanding the parents and losing their children and how awful that is. And then the humanity of, this is Sean Penn. He is a human. He does love his family. And all of this in the subject of, is the death penalty morally okay? And
but even that, ultimately, that's certainly a big part of it. It's a death penalty movie without question. But that idea, that simple idea, are you pro or against the death penalty, is put through the ringer and pushed and pulled and twisted in every way imaginable in the film. The cross-cutting of the execution, I don't think it's a spoiler to say this guy's headed to execution. I think the movie really sets you up for that appropriately. But the cross-cutting of that with the actual crime, his confession, with the scenes from this dastardly, unforgivable thing that he's done at the end of the film, when we've learned what we can and we've grown with these people as much as we're going to, like, it's my favorite movie of '95 for sure. It's still one of my favorite films of all time. It's a perfect movie because of the way it challenges, and because from start to finish, it insists that you feel everybody's pain and experience everybody's point of view. It just won't let you have it it won't let you have it in a simple way.
Yes. And I don't want to give away what I think is the spoiler, the ending.
Yeah.
But I was disappointed that I had seen it before and knew how it was going to happen, because I remember experiencing it for the first time and just being blown away. And just, I mean, I thought about that movie so much afterwards, and just that moral pull, like what is the right thing? I don't know.
The character that Sean Penn's character is based on, they really is based on a very real incident that is it's changed a little bit. Like, the character's name's changed. It's actually based kind of on a combination of two people. So there's a little bit of removing it enough from the truth that it doesn't have to be about these poor people that this stuff actually happened to, but only so much so that they still have that kernel of reality and truth built into the thing. But they, even from a death penalty standpoint, and Susan Sarandon and Tim Robbins, the director, you know, their stance on these sort of liberal issues are well known. Probably the three of us, our stance on them are probably pretty well known at this point. But even they had to make this decision because he was electrocuted. In reality, the guy that this is based on, and they had to decide whether they were going to show this nasty electrocution, or they decided, they, in a smart way, they decided, and this was the real life character that Susan Sarandon's playing. This was her point. She goes, no, I think they do lethal injection now and they consider that humane. And I think you need to show that, because if you show if you show some archaic electrocution, you give the audience a chance to say, well, they do injections now, it's much more humane. You, in a way, showing the worst thing is letting the audience off the hook. You need to show the most humane way and see if they can make their minds up about that in that way. She's
right, to bring it to the most base level. And I think, I mean, they do a really good job of showing how horribly the kids were raped and killed. And then
horribly,
he gets shot, you know, a shot that first puts him kind of to sleep before he even is killed. You know what I mean? And it is, I mean, that just adds to it. You know, look at what the kids had to go through and what the parents still have to go through. And he's basically going to sleep, but still, and that makes it even more, the moral base of.
And again, without spoiling the exact details, but there's a very key moment when the main events of the film have wrapped, where there are still characters who still need help struggling with their souls. And that is about, you know, you can, it's hard to take the religiousness away from the story, but you can to a degree, because philosophically, I think it still works. You still have to go on. You're still concerned with whatever your essence is, you know what I mean? That thing, your emotional well-being, can you recover? How can you take the next step? How can you wake up the next day? That battle is still happening, and that you get to see that that's always been at the core of who this nun, this true believer character, who just absolutely walks the walk in the most impossible circumstances imaginable. It's really something to see. It's really something to see, that film, I have to say.
Yeah.
Joel?
Yeah.
No, I laughs here.
There are moments of real humanity and humor in the thing, oddly enough. Well, it's certainly not a comedy in the way Nebraska is.
No,
it's a less dour film than Prisoners is, in my opinion.
Well, yeah. I would agree with that. I mean, one of the big criticisms of the movie was that, you know, people did not like that this horrible murderer rapist was shown as a human.
Right. I can understand.
So that was the lens.
To think about them as a human.
And that was the lens with which I tried to watch watch the movie for this show, was through the eyes of people. And that was the whole, you know, we keep talking about, you know, that was the point, was to say, yes, he is human. Humans do these horrible things. And you know, and then to say, you know, is a horrible thing done in the name of another horrible thing, is that a road that we should be going down as a species? Right. And, you know, and you know, yeah. So I was like, well, yeah, I would say that he was, you know, that the whole thing was presented pretty fairly. Both sides of the argument were presented pretty, you know, like, I like how you put it, Ryan. We're, you know, we spend all this time and we kind of get to, you know, because of who our protagonists are, we're, you know, kind of along the, you know, like we're going along and we're like, yeah, man, maybe he should just be put in prison for life. And then we get the victims' families coming in, and it's a great reminder of that. There, you know, there is an element to there is an argument to be made of, when you commit these sorts of acts, you forfeit your right to live. And that is a justification that is used. So yeah, it was
Since you did that, the least you can do is go away so that these people can find even a infinitesimal fraction of peace. We root for that as well. Please find peace, these people. You really want that desperately. If the movie doesn't play fair with you, I think it to some degree demonstrates that can't be accomplished through this.
Well, and that's
maybe. I mean, it doesn't come out and say that, but you really get the sense of that.
That's how well the movie is done. That is the point, I would say, of all of this. Kind of.
But you could argue, if you don't like that they showed the humanity of Sean Penn's character. Right.
Well, and I mean, if they didn't do that, then you would be fine thinking he deserves the death penalty. But that wasn't their point. Their point was to make you think about it. And they're not giving you an answer either way.
That's true.
At all. Which I think is brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately,
it tests your empathy in every way I can imagine a film doing it. It's maybe the best ever film at that. It's certainly in the conversation. My admiration, and it hasn't changed watching it last weekend. Just knocks me out.
And it kills me that in order to really be able to talk about it to the most base level would spoil the movie if somebody hasn't seen it. So if you haven't seen it, just watch.
We've kind of talked about what happens, and people get that, but I almost just did it a second ago because I really want to talk about that, but we're right to leave that alone.
Ryan, I was watching you. I was so ready to interrupt you. I'm like, I'm sorry, Ryan. I am going to have to cut.
I have to stop you right there. I stopped myself because I get what you're saying. We should leave it. We should let people. There's parts of this where you gotta confront it yourself and make up your own mind about it. It's as simple as that. So what we think isn't helpful.
I had seen it and already had felt those emotions because it's an amazing experience.
Well, I'm glad that you brought it up and that the show made us watch it again, because I love it in a way that I love few stories, and yet I don't love it enough that I want to see it very often. It's hard to explain.
Well, and that's what I was just going to say as I was going to wrap us up here. It's, we've taken great care to not spoil these movies, yet it is sort of difficult to say, if you haven't seen it, go run out and see Prisoners or go run out and see Dead Man Walking. These are great films. And Nebraska is, we can say, hey, go see Nebraska. It's really, if you haven't seen it, it's really
a different kind of thing, but there's no reason you shouldn't actually enjoy yourself watching it, and you'll get something very meaningful out of it. That's how I would sum that up. Prisoners, it's gonna be a rough ride, and you may end up where Shauna did and I did, or you may end up where Joel did, but hey, it's a really quality film that is at least asking these questions and taking this sort of event seriously. It's rough going, but I don't know. To me, it's like you watch sort of empty violence and stuff on Walking Dead every week or whatever. There's no reason you shouldn't give Prisoners a try. It's awesome film, at least. Walking Dead, I think you're all obligated to watch that. I don't mean to say it like it's an obligation.
You mean Dead Man Walking? Dead Man Walking. I was like,
that is what I meant.
Walking Dead. Wait, when did we go zombies on the thing? What?
You bastard. Well, I brought that up as a comparison to Prisoners. I just think that's it's entertaining enough, but it's empty calories. Prisoners is that kind of rather intense violence, but with real meaning to back it up. Dead Man Walking is a really, really important film that was made, and it's not some art house movie its subject matter is serious enough that it wasn't some smash runaway hit, but it's not some weird stylized art house movie with some non-traditional narrative. It is not a difficult movie to digest. It's just really, really challenging material. And And I recommend everybody see that. If I had a 100 movies to see before you die list, that would be on it, and it would be near the top.
Yeah. All right. So how are we on time?
We're all right. We can do a couple questions if they're short enough.
Yeah, well, hopefully. Yeah, let's do it. So again, so please go, check these movies out if you haven't checked them out. You won't be sorry. You might not like us for a day or two going, why did you make me do this? You might go, why Shauna did you make us do this? But you'll they are worth your while. All right.
Send
so
all
let's
complaints to the movie show with Joel and Ryan.
You absolutely could at Ask Joel and Ryan on Twitter and Instagram, or the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan page on Facebook, or askjoelandryan@gmail.com. All right, here we go. Let's try
to do that when I have the master sitting right next to me.
All right, so we have a couple questions that we can attend to.
I have a question. Who gave you the right to play God?
What the hell's going on out here?
Why do I bother?
What is the point in doing anything?
How dare you? What more do you want from me?
I have a question.
All right, so these are just a couple things that I came up with. Hopefully, they'll spark a conversation. Sean, of course, you are in on this. This isn't just like a
you're not off the hook yet.
You're not off the hook. You should absolutely chime in.
I do have to. My husband might come home, which will set the beagles howling. So I might
put it on mute. We'll book through it.
If the beagles have an opinion, we should get their opinion on these questions too.
Indeed.
All right. So the first one of the two, let's do this one. Streaming movies, and there's so many streaming services. We've touched on this before in previous shows with the number of different streaming platforms and exclusivity to certain streaming platforms, especially with like Netflix producing things, Hulu producing, Disney Plus producing for their own platforms. Do we feel like too many films, too many projects are going to get lost and not seen by audiences that should be seen? They would lose that chance to be seen if it were under a more traditional movie release model.
I don't think so, actually. I mean, there are movies that are going to get lost because of this, and they're different types of movies or different titles than would have been lost under a more traditional format. But I think that happened under traditional format. You would lose track of stuff. Stuff would go out of print. Stuff would just sort of disappear and be difficult to find or to get. So I don't think so. I think streaming, given that it's only these small handful of corporations that own the rights to these things, it really is only a few. There can't be too many more corporate streaming platforms appearing, if any more. I really think they're all kind of spoken for, right? I guess Sony maybe doesn't have one
Sony might
yet.
have, yeah, Sony probably would be the next big one.
But it's not like there's a jillion. The world is run by 11 companies or whatever, and 3 of them are media companies, and they all have their streaming services. They all have exclusive rights to their stuff. I think what the bummer of it is that in a hard media standpoint, that stuff gets out there into the market and into the secondhand market and into pawn shops or whatever. And it's there. Stuff is out there. You can find it. It gets into a library system. It gets into, those discs are getting old. They're getting scratched. They're going away, unless they're just lovingly preserved over there on the wall like mine. That bums me out, because I feel like the customer, the movie goer, is less in charge of what gets preserved. Whereas I think when there was something in your hand to preserve, we all had a part in it. And I feel like we don't anymore. It really is up to Sony. It really is up to these people, because it's not the board of directors. They don't care about anything except the profits. It's up to just some guy to decide, well, it's this or it's that, blah, blah, blah. It's bean counting. That bums me out. But no, there's so much content being created right now that it just, by math, some of it's going to get swept under the rug. It can't be helped. At the same time, you got more and more things to watch than ever before.
So it becomes more just to make sure I'm understanding you right, it becomes more like it's not so much, it's inevitable no matter what model it is that some new things yeah, some new things are going to get lost in the shuffle. That where it becomes a problem is it becomes harder and harder to discover that hidden gem. You know, like something
that old thing really gets way out of your reach if you missed it the first time over these days.
Like I'm just trying to think of a title that's released right now. Like this, I highly doubt that this is a hidden classic, but like Peter Rabbit is out now, and it kind of gets lost in the shuffle with Black Widow and all these other things. And then as things go into, you know, so then as like maybe 5 years down the line, it's going to be difficult to go, man, remember Peter Rabbit? I wonder if that was really good, you know, and you know, it's hard to, you know, because it might not be available on a streaming platform because it didn't do well.
And it really wasn't available any other way at the time. Yeah. So yeah, that could happen. But you know, could happen. With that culture, that started before streaming services. It started with the new release wall at Blockbuster and you not caring about something that came out before you were born, like I pretty much didn't for ages, or even the stuff that came out just after you were born. You know, when you're 25 years old, maybe you don't want to watch something from 1973. I'm a movie buff, so I just like things from all eras and ages. I like to feel the era and things. I think it's fun watching. I mean, I love all that, but that isn't how everybody approaches this. Most people are like, we got 2 hours. Let's escape our lives with something fun. What's on the wall? Oh, look, Sandra Bullock's in it. I like her. Done. You know, when you bring it home and it's over, right? Streaming is just that. It's not that different than that, really. And that is how it's been for a long time. So I get down on streaming services, but I don't want to get too down on it. In a way, it's a magical, wonderful thing. So much right at your fingertips right now. But it also funnels you and tries to make your decisions for you in a way that I you know, you've heard me talk. I lament some of that stuff, but yeah, it's not either or. Honestly, it was always a danger and always a tough thing.
Sure. So Shauna, you have any thoughts on that?
To say much. I'm sorry.
I agree.
Like Sandra Bullock.
Sandra Bullock.
Saturday Night Live, I think it was, had this sketch called when Netflix made where they were splitting their plans or doing something stupid, and their stock like just took a crash because of this one simple announcement. It just shows you how volatile it is for these companies. And they kept they had a whole series of these where they had to keep having these sort of apologies. Well, we've heard you, audiences, you know, and Saturday Night Live did this fake one where they're like, now we have, instead of 2 plans, we have 7 plans. And I just remember my favorite. I don't remember any of the others, but the 5th plan was the only Blindside plan, where you sign up and for $4.99 a month, we'll send you a Blindside in the mail on a disc. And then you send it back to us and we will send it to you again. And that was just it. You just kept swapping discs Blindside back and forth. And that, to me, that was funny, not just because it's so stupid, but it rings true. Like there's some people who, whether it's actually Blindside again and again and again, really just want Blindside again and again and again. And that's hilarious. And I think that's lamentable, but it's also okay. How you enjoy movies is cool. We're trying not to judge people for that stuff. So the more Blindside, the merrier, I guess. I don't know. Directed by John Lee Hancock, by the way, everybody.
Yeah. All right. So another question, final question here. Hard-hitting question coming at you here. Could a game show or a board game ever actually work as a movie?
Clue?
Well, yeah, I mean, Clue.
Then I guess the answer is yes.
I mean, yeah, I mean, but there are people that also don't believe that Clue works as a movie. I mean,
those people are wrong. Right? I mean, we all think Clue works as a movie.
Well, okay, so let's expand it. So like that was a board game. Can a video game ever work? I mean, there have been numerous attempts to make video games work as.
They work as movies. Have any video games been turned into a great movie? Not yet, I don't think. Yeah, but they work as movies. Doom.
What do you think holds them back? What do you think holds them back from being good movies?
Well, because they're just setups, and I think the movies feel obligated to the setup, and then there's two things. One, they're getting better and better, although people are seeing them less and less. So I don't know if that's good or bad. Sonic Hedgehog, I mean, I don't have a lot to say about that, but things like the Tomb Raider reboot, what's the film with Fassbender in it? Assassin's Creed.
Yep.
These are people who grew up on video games that are making video game movies now. Whereas earlier it was the old baby boomers that were making these video games, and they would take the premise and just try and make a movie out of it as best they could. But I don't think they really were into it. Assassin's Creed is a succeed per level film. That's literally the structure of the thing. It's very video gamey. It's very cinematic, but it's very video gamey. It really takes that idea and sticks to it to the bitter end. People didn't love that movie because it was self-serious and a bunch of other things they don't like, but it was really about the game. It really was. I could feel it in the film, and I've never played Assassin's Creed, but I could feel, this is, now they got to accomplish this on this level, and then they got to fight this boss at the end of, like, it literally was a movie based on a video game.
Yeah.
Maybe more of that will make them better. I don't know. It's hard to say. I don't know. But I do know that we're getting closer because the people making the movies now are the people who love the games. That enthusiasm, I think, is going to make them better. I hope.
Yeah. That as someone who had a little bit too much to drink and made an error in judgment and watched the new Mortal Kombat, which is an almost unwatchable piece of crap.
There's never been a good Mortal Kombat film, really.
There really has, and this one
as bad
was
as any of them.
Oh my gosh, it was so bad. As someone who spent his college years just in the dorm playing Mortal Kombat with my friends, it was so it was like, not that I'm like waiting for the next Mortal Kombat, but I'm like, oh, this will be a silly fun thing.
You want to hear?
Ken's not home.
You want to hear an unpopular opinion?
Go.
Battleship is a pretty good movie based on a board game. I know everybody hates Battleship because it's just this Transformers ripoff piece of flag waving crap, which it is. It is that. I get it. But there's a whole moment where they're playing Battleship on the thing, and it's really kind of intense, like not with the pegs quite, but with like little electronic grid references and stuff. They're tracing this invisible alien ship. Why are there aliens? I don't know. Look, I'm just saying that movie did its best to take that game and make it part of the movie. And I admired that. Those were my favorite parts of the film, in fact. It's not good, but it's okay.
Do you have a favorite video game movie, Shauna?
I don't play video games.
I bet you loved the Mario Brothers movie.
I like the Mario Brothers movie. I don't love it.
I like the Tomb Raider or whatever, the first one.
The first one, that's the worst one.
I guess I didn't watch the rest of them. The dogs are about to go crazy.
All right. We'll let you go.
Okay.
We've said our piece. Clue, though, you nailed it anyway.
Yeah, Clue is, you're right. Clue is the exception that proves that's the exception that proves the rule.
All right. Thanks for hanging out
all
with us,
right,
Shauna.
friends.
Good movie club all.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for joining us. Again, please reach out to us at The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan page on Facebook, at Ask Joel and Ryan on Twitter and Instagram, askjoelandryan@gmail.com. And if you are watching this on the YouTube channel, well, then you should click subscribe. And if you want to leave us a note below, you certainly can do that. And one of us will get back to you.
Little thumbs up thing, you guys. That's not hard.
A little thumb. Yeah, give us a little thumbs up.
Click the thumbs up thing. It doesn't hurt anybody, and it helps us a lot. Do it.
Yep. Keep spreading the word, people. Share our show. We would love for it to get in more ears and in front of more eyes. All right, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining us this week, and we will see you next time on The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. Thank you again, Shauna.
Thanks, Beagles.
Thank you for listening to The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. Remember, all views and opinions represented in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the speaker and do not represent those people, institutions, or organizations that the speaker may or may not be associated with, unless explicitly stated. None of these views and opinions were intended to malign or deceive. And now, here's the producers, circa 1982, to play us out.